Hello, and welcome to the Nutrition and Life podcast. This is where we look at various nutrition and fitness-related topics through the lens of application. We want to give you practical takeaways so that you can create your healthiest, best self backed by knowledge. Now, on to the episode with your host, Coach Lisa.
Hello and welcome back to the Nutrition and Life podcast. My name is Lisa and I'm super excited to talk to another guest today, Andrea Nicholson. She is a specialist when it comes to helping people optimize their metabolism, their gut health, and just generally living healthier lives. Welcome to the podcast, Andrea.
Thank you so much for having me. I am really excited to be here today.
It's my absolute pleasure, and I look forward to digging into how people can optimize their general well-being through gut health strategies, through better metabolism, and so on, because that is something that many of our listeners and clients really are looking into, or especially if they're struggling with like, hey, why am I not losing weight? I'm doing quote unquote everything right, and still I'm not seeing the results. Is this kind of your general clientele as well, or a lot of people that come to you that feel that way?
Yeah, I definitely see a wide variety of people, but there's a common thread, especially when it comes to digestive issues, which can be really wide. You know, that can be indigestion or the diarrhea, constipation kind of picture. Bloating is super common, just being gassy, those kinds of things. But I also see a bunch of people who end up having digestive issues they don't know about because they don't realize that gut health is the foundation of pretty much every other health condition. And so even if you're not having digestive symptoms, it does not mean you don't have a gut health issue. So I pretty much focus on gut health regardless of why people come to me, but I do see a lot of digestive issues.
I love that you started with that, because I do think that there is more and more research emerging also about that gut-brain connection, that mental health issues are more and more being related back to gut health issues as well, or at least, you know, being a contributor there. So I'm very much looking forward to digging into that as well. But first of all, if you would like to introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I'm a board certified holistic nutritionist, and I specialize in all the gut health issues. So a lot of the digestive stuff. I also do a lot with blood sugar, because that's another hidden one that a lot of people don't realize, that they don't have great blood sugar management. It's not just about diabetes. That's obviously the most obvious, blood sugar imbalance, but there's a lot of stuff. I have a virtual practice based out of Colorado. So I work with people from all over. Whether you live here near me or not, my practice is entirely virtual. And I do a lot of functional testing with people so that we can really establish that, baseline, and then have specific measurable things that we're working towards, in addition to the things that you just want to see in your life. What do you want to be feeling? All of those kinds of things. So we pair the hard scientific data with the subjective, how you feel, and really try to get you to that ideal health.
I love it. And your podcast is titled Holistic Health Bites, which that really caught my eye because, well, holistic. We like that holistic approach. And as we were just alluding to, everything is linked from gut health to mental well-being to seeing the aesthetic results that you're after. Then the second word, health, obviously, very much into that, because even if people are looking for aesthetic results, we still don't want to be feeling like crap if we're looking amazing. And bites, that just gives me kind of the notion of practical takeaways as well. So people, if you are not familiar with Andrea's podcast, please go and check it out, the Holistic Health Bites podcast. Otherwise, on Instagram, you can find her on Healthy Life with Andrea, just to get to know her a little bit more. And I think that has coaching links as well, in case anyone is interested in working with her. But I want to backpedal into that gut health that we touched on earlier already. So I'm curious to hear, what are some of the most common things that you see amongst your clients? You already said bloating would be the biggest one. So what does that often come back to? Because most of the time we just think maybe it was dairy that I had. That's people think like, I'm bloated, I had dairy, or I'm bloated, I had XYZ, but it's not always that straightforward. What is your experience with that?
Yeah, I think there's a huge variety of reasons why people have digestive issues of any kind, or really symptoms of any kind, even if they're not digestive related. So yes, it could be as simple as you're consuming a food that your body doesn't agree with or can't digest. So maybe you do have an intolerance to something like dairy or gluten or soy or, something like that. Maybe you're just eating inflammatory foods in general. If you're not eating real foods, if you're eating those artificially sweetened or artificially colored, all of those things can cause bloating because they're not real food. So that's the first level, is really look hard at the foods you are consuming and see if you can find a food trigger, because that absolutely could be true. The deeper stuff that can happen is where, this is why I love functional testing, because you can have the same symptoms come from someone who, say, doesn't have enough microbes in their gut, who's really depleted in the microbial profile, doesn't have enough diversity, doesn't have enough overall bacteria, can also come from having the wrong kinds of bacteria. Maybe you have, an overgrowth of a bad bacteria. Maybe you have a parasite. There's all of these different things that can go wrong. Maybe you're lacking in digestive enzymes, so you're not properly able to break down your foods. If you have whole foods kind of stuck in your system because your body doesn't have the raw materials to break them down, you can't eliminate them properly because now you've got this undigested food kind of stewing in your system. But you can also end up with bacterial overgrowths from those large food particles. You can end up with leaky gut, where you have food actually making it into your bloodstream without being properly broken down. And if you're not breaking it down, you don't have those building blocks that you need to make enzymes and hormones and muscle and bone and neurotransmitters and immune cells and all of the things that we need those vital nutrients from our food for. So there's a lot of different reasons that you might feel bloated or you might have a particular symptom. And so I think it's really important to try to figure out what your unique cause is.
I really think that is such a good point. Unfortunately, with gut health, like with most things in nutrition, I have found that it is just so incredibly individual. And so it's so hard for people to really figure out what works for them, because they just think, okay, I'm having digestive issues, I need to eat more fiber. But then it might turn out that you're somebody who does not do well with a high fiber diet. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you might have someone who has digestive issues, and you could be, or who's absolutely fine with, 60 grams of fiber per day. It is completely different. So we cannot standardize and say everyone needs to eat X amount of vegetables or needs to eat a ton of cruciferous vegetables every single day. It is really often coming down to trial and error, and I think oftentimes also observation, which is of course the first step. And it sounds so straightforward and so simple, but many times this is where people don't even start there. If you have something completely different to eat every single day, it's going to be really difficult to pinpoint which one of those foods is. Or if you are resistant to even just keeping a food diary, us as coaches, we're going to be struggling figuring out what it is. So that, in my opinion, is often the first place to start. I'm curious if you do take a lot of your clients through an elimination diet, and if so, do you have a particular go-to, or does it depend on the symptoms?
Yeah, it definitely does depend. And I 100% agree with everything you just said, that it's very individualized. We have to really take a good hard look at those things. And we also have to be aware of the fact that these things don't change overnight. Mm-hmm. So you can't just eliminate dairy for a day and be like, nope, I don't feel any better. Definitely. No, this stuff is, your body is complex. It is an ecosystem, and it takes time to really see these changes. So you kind of have to just commit to sticking with it for a while before you're going to have any answers. And like you said, there's a million variables. It can be really difficult to narrow it down. So generally speaking, if I have someone who is just really struggling to figure out what their triggers are, of course, we can go to some testing, but we can also just, like you said, test out different foods. And so I generally like to start with evaluating what they're currently eating. And if there's something that they eat a lot of, well, that falls under kind of one of the major categories of sensitivities or bloating issues, let's start with that. Let's start with maybe cutting down on the thing that you're eating a lot of. Or we can go with, let's pick the lowest hanging fruit, maybe something that you're like, I could totally give that up and that would be easy. So I think we kind of have to work with each individual client to figure it out. If they're like, I need results immediately, then they're going to be more willing to maybe do the harder things. But someone else who's like, yeah, I really just don't like this symptom and it'd be great if it was gone. Okay, well, then maybe we go with the lowest hanging fruit. And so we kind of just work together to figure out what that plan is and decide together how extreme we go, how fast we go, what we start with, all of those things.
I love that. Nothing worse than being told by someone you need to do XYZ, but you can't practically implement it into your life at your current stage of life. Yes, I'm definitely on the same page. And I have taken people through low FODMAP diets, for instance, but also some more extreme diets. For instance, I had a client coming to me and she said, I've literally tried everything. I don't know what to do. I was like, well, if you tried everything, you would you would have found a solution. But anyway, we actually did a carnivore diet for some time, and like people who are recurring listeners will know that that is not something that I generally advocate for, but it can be a good starting point as an elimination diet. And she did really, really well with it. But at the same point here, you can't just say like, I'm going to do carnivore for a day or two and then reintroduce foods. You're not giving your body enough time. The same with the low FODMAP. I would usually say minimum is probably, a week or two of strict, also not you have quote unquote half-assing those kind of things, but really, being strict with that. But then on other sides, it might be, like you alluded to, a very low-hanging fruit, just as you're consuming a ton of artificial sweeteners or 500 grams of cruciferous vegetables raw right before bed. Yes, okay, your poor digestive system. This might be the reason why.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, I totally get that. But have you found that these gut health issues more often than not are also connected with weight loss issues? Or
they certainly can be. Yeah, absolutely. There are entire classes of bacteria that they are learning about now that actually break down the food in kind of a different way, and they help you absorb more calories.
Oh, interesting.
So eating the same diet, if you have these particular microbes, you're actually absorbing more of those calories, which can cause you to gain weight. And then there's other classes of bacteria that can actually cause you to kind of use those calories. They burn energy or they generate heat, which wastes energy, which means you don't absorb those calories. So yeah, there's huge correlations with specific gut health issues and sometimes these microbes that directly relate to weight loss, weight gain, weight maintenance, energy. All of these things are directly related to gut health for sure.
Now, are you someone who recommends probiotics or prebiotics or just generally any kind of supplementation for, let's just say, majority of clients that you have, or do you start somewhere else?
I think it depends on the client. I do think a lot of people do need microbes. They've seen from hundreds of studies that most of us are pretty depleted in microbes just from toxin exposure and poor diets and high stress and not enough sleep and all the things that we do to ourselves every single day. Most people could benefit from adding good bacteria back in and really supporting that whole digestive terrain for the bacteria to thrive on. But I do think like the prebiotics, I mean, you can certainly take supplements for that, but really what that is different fibers and different, polyphenols and those kinds of things that can be really great for the microbes to feed on. But a lot of times you can also get that from your diet. So I think it depends. This is another one of those where it's individualized. Some people really don't handle those specific kinds of fiber very well. And so a lot of the prebiotic supplements will actually make them feel worse. Some people feel amazing, and that's exactly what they need. So I think this is just another one of those areas where we have to be okay with trying different things and finding that sweet spot for you.
Totally. Absolutely. I did recently see a study on probiotics, on fermented foods and so on. And unfortunately, they didn't really, I mean, they showed that there was a huge improvement in just general gut microbiome health, I guess, from consuming those, but mostly at high quantities, such as like 4 servings per day. And I was thinking to myself, who in the world eats 4 servings of kimchi, sauerkraut, and
Right.
kefir per day? Like, as awesome as it sounds. And I'm, for one, someone who is very, mindful of that. And I do like and enjoy probiotics foods, but 4 servings, that is a lot of sauerkraut. I cannot eat
Absolutely.
all of that. So yeah, sometimes we might want to help out a little bit more. And I'm generally in that camp when it comes to supplementation, like fish oil and things like that. When people always ask, hey, can I get that from Whole Foods alone? I'm like, yeah, you probably can, but how consistently do you actually eat 2 to 3 times per week a good quality fatty fish, etc.? And that's just one example.
Yeah, absolutely. I think supplements can be really beneficial for those things that either you're like, oh, I really just don't like that food, or I can't afford that food, because that can definitely be true, especially with seafood.
Yes.
There's some of those things. And not that supplements are necessarily cheap, because if you want good quality, they're expensive. They really are. If you want good quality that's been tested, that you know exactly what's in it, it's pure, it doesn't have contaminants, you're going to want to get high quality, good supplements, and they're going to be more expensive. So that's not necessarily a cheap option, but it's probably cheaper than, some of the high quality seafood and stuff. So I think there's definitely great benefit in adding supplements, but I think we need to be strategic about it. I don't think there's any benefit in just, loading up on multivitamins and these generic gunshot style supplements. I think they really should be targeted and specific to things that you're lacking in, things that maybe your body doesn't process as well. And maybe you've seen, like on a blood test, that you need more vitamin B12. Okay, well, you can be very specific with that then. You don't necessarily need to take a boatload of other things just guessing. So exactly. I think we just really need to be strategic about it.
Yes, and like you alluded to also, retesting that on a regular basis, or just simply rethinking that on a regular basis, because your lifestyle right now might be completely different than 2 years ago, or even a month ago. You might be traveling, and then supplements can be really, really handy to get your micronutrients, and or you might be way more stressed right now or not, and so on. So that's such a good point. Just retesting and reevaluating on a regular basis. I'm curious, how often do you communicate with your clients, or do you often also have clients that are just one-off? They want to have a one-off consult and send you lab work, and that's it?
I generally work in packages. I don't think anybody really gets anywhere in one session. They just don't. I think as much as you may believe that you're on the right track and you're doing all the things and you just have a couple questions, that ends up not being true. I'm currently working with a client that I would have actually agreed. I would have thought he knows it all. He's like you said, he's already doing carnivore because he's got IBS, and he was going to the most extreme, example of elimination, trying to figure out what he could do to fix this IBS. He was following like a million online experts that are really good, that I completely agree with their opinions on. And it was like, yeah, I kind of at the beginning thought, he's not going to need that much support. He just really wants the testing. And he's actually been one of the people I've talked to the most.
Interesting.
Because it's not that simple. Yes, he already knows how to evaluate foods. He already knows how to read labels. He already knows a lot about like just nutrition science and how to evaluate certain foods. He still needs a lot of support. And sometimes, even when we know what we should be doing, having an outside perspective can show you blind spots you didn't even know you had. A third party can ask you questions you didn't even know were questions. There are things we don't know that we don't know. And having that expert in your back pocket, or even just someone who knows as much as you. I mean, a lot of our colleagues hire coaches themselves.
Yep. I
completely changed my own health working with someone else.
Yep.
So I just have found I've done it all. I've done one-off sessions. I've done quick things. I've done longer things, and the one-off things just don't work. People don't get the results. Then they're not happy. I don't feel fulfilled because I didn't make a difference in their lives. Like, it just doesn't work. So I typically work in, most commonly, 6-month packages.
Mhm.
And as far as how often, it really depends on the client. A lot of times there's more meetings up front when we're really addressing, lab tests and new data and kind of getting to know each other and tweaking and making a lot of modifications. And then it generally gets less frequent as we're just sort of writing it out and we aren't making so many changes. But I leave it up to the client as far as how often we really meet.
I totally agree with you. I think a big point there is also accountability and not basically having that continuance on going forward. So essentially, someone is going to ask, Andrea is going to ask in a month, hey, how did you implement this and that, or in a week's time, or however frequently you talk to someone. I think that is really, really a big point. And then also, sometimes you don't want to do all that thinking work on your own. Do you agree with that? Sorry, are you still here?
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with all of that. I think just having someone that you're checking in with regularly really does keep you on track.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
this stuff can be difficult. It can be lonely. It can be difficult, especially when the people in your life aren't doing the same thing.
Oh, yes.
Having someone else that understands what you're doing, that supports what you're doing, that can commiserate with you when it's hard, because this can be hard.
Yep.
And that can talk you through those times when you're like, now I feel worse. Well, knowing that that's normal, you're going to have days as bacteria are dying off, or as your body's adjusting to a new plan, or whatever that looks like. You're going to have days that you feel worse. That's
Exactly.
normal.
And I think on those days, then not making any knee-jerk reactions and saying, "Oh, this isn't working," because one day I'm feeling terrible. That's so often what I experience. And then having someone that you can text or email or call and be like, "Is this normal that I'm getting worse before it's getting better?" And you as a coach, you can be like, "Yes, actually, quite often that is exactly what we almost want
To happen." Yeah.
So, no, I think a really, really good point. I wanted to dig a little bit more into that side where you said you also specialize on metabolism or metabolic health. I would love for you to just give a few pointers that you normally touch on with your clients when it comes to optimizing their metabolism, because I know most of our listeners, that is what they're after. They know that if they have a better metabolism, they're going to be able to eat more, burn more in general, or simply optimize, whether it is things like muscle growth or fat burning and just, body composition, I guess.
Yeah, I think metabolism is so much more than we sort of give it credit for. Most of us just think that's how many calories we burn every day. And so we're, matching this calories in and calories out equation, but it's so much more. Metabolism is officially every chemical reaction in your body. So this is you making hormones. This is you making muscle. This is you burning fat. This is you building fat. This is detox. This is all of those things, all the chemical reactions that are occurring in your body all day, every day. And the vast majority of the energy that we burn every day has nothing to do with exercise or movement.
Yep.
It has nothing to do with anything you directly control. That may sound defeating, but it's actually not. So if you're feeding,
that is a great point, because I think it's liberating, as opposed to thinking I need to exercise every single day in order to be able to eat.
Right. Yeah. You cannot outrun your fork. You cannot outrun the rest of your lifestyle. Exercise is a great component, but it really has nothing to do with the amount of calories that you're burning. It has nothing to do with weight loss, really. It has to do with strength and mental health and detox and so many other amazing benefits. But we also have to pair in quality sleep and stress loads and stress management techniques. We also have to be eating the right foods and on the right schedule. We've gotten into this society of snacking and of constantly being fed. And one of the biggest drivers of just kind of tapping into where your metabolism is really knowing, are you even hungry?
Mm-hmm.
We are so incredibly fed in most of the, kind of Western societies or modern societies. We don't even really know when we're physically truly hungry because we're never truly hungry. We're always fed. And so we need to kind of get back into really feeling our real body sensations, eating real food, not eating all these fake and diet foods and artificial ingredients, getting back in touch with what we really need, how much we need, how often we need it, just understanding when you need to sleep more instead of just always running on empty. Yep. Really getting back in touch with those signals. And I think when we're more in touch with what our body is actually doing, then our metabolisms are naturally working better. And so we're making hormones properly. We're detoxing properly. We're making all of these things in our bodies that we need to make and get rid of and clean house and rebuild and all the things that our bodies need to do. So we just kind of need to get back to nature, get back to what our bodies were really designed to eat and do.
Really, really good point. So firstly, the calm aspect, I think that you mentioned, that is such a big point, because in a rushed state, in a distracted state, it is incredibly difficult to actually even just listen to your body or hear your body's cues. When we're stressed, when we want to emotionally eat and we think we're hungry, often it is the other aspects, such as bringing down the stress levels or distracting ourselves or keeping ourselves entertained, etc. So when people sometimes ask me, does intuitive eating work? I say, yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, also depends what does it work for, not always necessarily for weight loss, but does it quote unquote work? But and you need to preface this by saying you need to teach your body that, though, again, because in our modern society, just naturally, you're not going to know how to do that anymore. We have all these highly palatable foods around. We have alcohol. We have constant access to food. So if you just quote unquote intuitively eat, you're going to probably want to snack all the time. You're probably going to want to have more to eat when you have had a couple of glasses of alcohol. You are going to like all these kinds of things. And we're so out of tune with our body that we need to recalibrate that first, if that intuitive aspect is something that you're trying to get back at. And it's hardly ever going to work for weight loss, in my opinion, just because that kind of negates that whole definition of intuitive eating. But overall, it can be a good strategy for weight maintenance, for a healthy eating pattern, etc., if we learn how to do that properly, again, for sure. So yes, how do you start with someone, though, if their metabolism is wrong? And you have explained all of that, which you just said to me. What is a homework, I guess, for lack of a better word, that you would give them and just say, okay, until we talk next time, I want you to focus on these 5 things, whatever it might be?
Yeah. So at the beginning, I really want to evaluate what they're eating. And if there's any of those kind of artificial, hyper palatable foods, any of those kinds of things, let's get rid of those first. Let's get back to eating real food first. Really reading labels, reading ingredient lists, paying attention to all of the things that you're taking into your body. That's kind of the first stage. And then I would say, let's try to eliminate snacking as much as possible. And let's get back to eating real meals. And with that, eating in a good way. So we're sitting down, we're in a calm state, we're eating slowly, we're chewing thoroughly. Like all of these good habits, instead of eating in the car, eating in a meeting, eating on the run, all of those things, your body can't digest properly when you're in that stressed out state. And while that might not feel like stress, being distracted is a stress. Your brain can't do that many things at one time. And so it does whatever it has to do for survival. And really, that's not it. Digestion is not survival in that moment. Driving your car is survival in that moment. And so we need to kind of get back to normal eating behaviors. I find that a lot of people actually do really well with their metabolisms when they eat just less often in general, not just getting back to meals, but when you're really in touch with true physical hunger, maybe you're not actually hungry 3 times a day. Maybe you're hungry twice a day. And maybe that's not at traditional meal times. Are you okay with that? Now, there's obviously the whole social side of that as well, when you want to eat with your family or those kinds of things. And we have to kind of make concessions around those things. I'm not asking anyone to give up eating with their family because there's tremendous other benefits to doing those things. So you certainly take all of this in context with your life. But if you're single, or if your whole family is kind of on this board, if it's just you and a partner, explore where it makes sense for you. Maybe you're a breakfast lunch person. Maybe you're a lunch dinner person. Like whatever that looks like for you, just be open to it. Be open to finding those great things for your body. And then lastly, I would say one of the best simple things you can do when you're done eating, go for a walk. Doesn't have to be a speed walk. Doesn't have to be a 5-mile walk. Walk around the block. Just go for a walk. Something really simple. I think that's a really easy thing that can lower your blood sugar.
So underrated.
Can help your digestion. It's just such a simple thing that makes such a huge difference.
Super cool tip. I love that one. Generally back to whole foods, let's say at least 80-90% of your diet. Love it. Proper meals as opposed to constant snacking. That is a point that I do want to touch on again, because many of the people that come to me as well, they'll basically snack all day, feeling like they don't really eat. These calories add up. B, you're constantly, like, your blood sugar is just all over the place, as you mentioned. C, most of the time these foods are often of lower quality. It might be like a bite here, a piece of toast there, and then a protein bar over here. And like, instead of actually just filling up your plate with some decent vegetables, maybe good quality carbs and protein, and then feeling satiated and stopping. And that is also something that'll teach people to stop when they're actually satiated, as opposed to always feeling like you want more and then keep it on going. Or other times people really undereat throughout the day, and then they come home and have these huge cravings and just eat everything inside. And those are really two big issues, in my opinion, when it comes to, yes, blood sugar, but also just food quality, like literally everything, and not at the least the relationship with food. That is just not healthy, neither the constant snacking nor the total restriction throughout the entire day and then eating anything inside. So I think that's a really good point, like finding the right frequency of meals for you. That's not to say that snacks cannot be part of a diet, in my opinion. It totally depends on energy requirements. Like you said, lifestyle is a big one. If you are constantly on the go all day long, you should still be having, whether maybe a smoothie on the way to work, or in between, like something, if you can notice your energy levels drop, etc. But still, like, find what works for you, experiment a little bit. So I really like that. And the walks as well, it can be such a great habit with your family, with your spouse or whatever. After your dinner, you've done the dishes, and then, like you said, just around the block. Like, people that have a dog are usually great at that. So I wish anyone else who doesn't have a dog would just get into that habit also, because you would make the effort to take your dog out for 10-15 minutes, and even if it's just for the fresh air, or not just right away sit down in front of the couch and become a couch and basically hinder your metabolism from doing its very best. So love these 3 takeaways. You mentioned that walk is also great for blood sugar regulation. Maybe you can explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So our blood sugar obviously goes up when we eat, and how high it goes up is totally dependent on what you ate. And there's a little bit of bio individuality here as well. So some people two people could eat the exact same thing and one would have a really big spike and one won't. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. There's insulin sensitivity, there's genetic differences, there's, how active you are throughout the day. There's what order of foods you're eating in, do you eat the carbs first or the protein first or the vegetables first? Or, there's all kinds of different things that play into that. So diet is obviously a big part of that, and eating, the lower sugar foods can make a big difference. But I think one of the best ways to lower that blood sugar impact is exercise. And the reason for that is, rather than storing the sugar or converting the sugar to fat or any of those kinds of things, if you go for a walk or do any kind of exercise, you're opening your muscles to use that sugar right away. And so it goes straight from your digestion and gets burned as energy. And so you're not adding to any of your storage systems. And so it literally is taking the blood right out of your system, or the sugar right out of your blood system. And so that just naturally lowers your blood sugar. So this is important, even if you don't have diabetes or, any diagnosed blood sugar dysregulation issues. This is a big one for everyone, because anything you're not burning is getting stored.
Yeah. And I think many people might not necessarily think of like, oh, walk that's not going to burn a ton of calories, or I don't feel like I'm exercising, but still it's about that signal. Are you sending your body the signal, okay, now it's time to rest and just chill and store the energy, or now it's time to utilize? And that can even be that signal. It can be as low as just a walk. You also said something about the sequence of foods that we eat. I think that's a really good thing to touch on as well. Would you like to explain that for us?
Yeah, there's some research that shows that depending on what order you eat your foods in has a huge impact on how quickly certain components get digested. And so if you eat either like non-starchy vegetables or proteins and fats before you eat starchier carbs, that slows down the digestion of those starchier carbs, and it slows down and reduces the overall blood sugar spike that you get. So just making that change alone can kind of still give you a little bit of ability to eat those starchier carbs. Now, this does not mean you eat a steak and then you can have a whole plate of pasta. Like, this is still not the excuse to eat whatever you want. But if you were to have, say, a chicken breast and a side salad and some pasta, if you ate them either the salad first and then the protein and then the pasta, or the protein, the salad, and then the pasta, either way with the pasta at the very end, you'll have a lower blood sugar spike. And you can very clearly see how this works with something like a continuous glucose monitor, where you're literally monitoring what your blood sugar is doing minute after minute after minute. You can evaluate how certain foods work in your body, and you can see how just changing the order of what you're eating can make a huge difference. Now, obviously, you don't need to worry about this eating order if you're not eating those starchy carbs to begin with and just sticking to the non-starchy carbs. But how often is that going to work for most people? Most of us are going to have potatoes or rice or, these things at least sometimes. And so kind of knowing these little tricks can make a big difference.
That's such a good trick. I have found that particularly to be true when it comes to breakfast, breaking that fast when we're most sensitive for that. And I think for clients, it has made a big difference when it comes to their cravings and energy levels throughout the day. It will make a world of a difference if you just have, like, as breaking that fast, again, just a piece of toast or, cereal on its own, or whether you have, eggs and maybe some vegetables, and then you complement that with a piece of toast, or low-fat Greek yogurt, and complement your cereal or, whatever else you might have in the morning. So I think that breaking of the fast is the most important point in time. But like you said, you can also utilize that as a different strategy, or just generally strategy. I feel like it makes you feel satiated quicker than if you start with those simple carbs. So, you eat your vegetables and your protein first, you're more likely to have less of that pasta, of the rice, than if you started with that. And that's why I usually caution people of that bread basket when they eat out. I say, you can have a slice of bread. I would highly, highly encourage you to have something else first though, and then have a piece of bread, because otherwise, before you know it, that bread basket is empty and you're still feeling hungry. You're not going to notice that you even ate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely avoid eating what they call naked carbs. So carbs all by themselves, without fat, without protein.
That term. That is such a good term. I'm gonna run with that. That's good.
Yeah. So that would apply to a piece of bread. That would apply to a piece of fruit. Any of those things. Don't eat carbs naked. Eat them with or after eating fats and proteins.
Really good point. Well, thank you so much, Andrea. I have very much appreciated all your input here. Is there anything before we wrap this up that you'd like to give our listeners as advice? Any last words of wisdom?
Yeah, I would just say, be your own best advocate. It may feel like you have tried everything, but like you said earlier, you haven't, or you would have found the answer. So keep digging, keep fighting, keep sticking with things, even when it maybe doesn't feel like it's working. Keep researching, keep finding the answers. And, I would really consider working with someone, because you'll get there that much faster.
100%. Thank you so much. And again, you can find Andrea on Instagram at Healthy Life with Andrea, and also just her podcast, Holistic Health Bites. Highly recommended. So thank you for your time, Andrea.
Thank you so much for having me. I have really enjoyed this today.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode on social. Very much appreciated. You can also follow us on Instagram at Nutrition Coaching and Life, or head to our website, www.nutritioncoachingandlife.com, where we provide more valuable content. Have a wonderful day. Now go out and work on your best self.